The pirate fleet drifted through the cold space between stars, their ships dark and sharp like blades against the endless black. The captains leaned in their chairs with greedy smiles, their crews restless for treasure, their weapons ready for plunder. When the first mate on the lead ship pointed at the screen and shouted, there was a lonely cargo ship ahead, a simple freighter with no escorts, moving slow as if waiting to be taken. The pirates cheered, for nothing pleased them more than prey. That looked weak and unguarded. The fleet adjusted course, their engines roaring with hungry fire as they closed in like a pack of wolves on a lamb. Through the black glass of the viewport, the freighter looked ordinary, long and thin, built for storage, not battle, its outer hull dented by time and travel, its lights dim, as if power was low. The pirates licked their lips, already dreaming of stolen cargo, slaves to sell, or ransom to demand. But as they scanned the ship more carefully, a strange detail caught their attention. On the side of the freighter, painted in bold lines, was a message, not a signal of surrender, not a plea for mercy, but a warning, 3 words that froze the air in the bridge of every pirate vessel. The word said, "Pirates beware, a human is on board." The captains blinked, and the crews burst into laughter, loud and mocking. One shouted that it must be a joke. Another said maybe the cargo ship had gone mad. Another swore it was just a trick, because who would ever fear one single human? Yet beneath the laughter, there was something else, a small tightness in the air, a whisper that even the bravest pirate could not ignore, because there were stories, old stories about humans. Stories told in hushed voices around campfires on forgotten moons. Stories of wars where humans stood alone against armies and yet walked away alive while their enemies did not. Stories of strange strength, of endless fury, of a will that refused to break. The pirates laughed. Yes, but some laughed too loud, trying to hide the unease building inside their bones. On the lead ship, the pirate commander stood tall, his scales glinting under the dim red light. His tusked mouth curled into a sneer. He growled that this was nothing but paint, a weak attempt to scare them away. He swore the freighter would fall in minutes, that the cargo would be theirs. His crew roared in agreement, but the youngest officer, small and uncertain, leaned closer and whispered, "What if it is true?" The commander struck him across the face and spat that fear was poison. He ordered the fleet to prepare boarding parties, weapons charged, grapples armed, shields up. But just as the pirates readied themselves, the freighter stirred. Its engines lit up with a sudden hum, soft at first, then growing, a low vibration that carried across the scanners of every pirate ship, the sound of machinery awakening from long sleep. Its lights flickered alive, one by one across the hull, white and cold, like eyes opening in the dark. Systems that should have been broken seemed to repair themselves in an instant. The freighter no longer looked weak. It looked awake, alive, waiting, watching. The pirates paused, their fingers hovering above, their weapons, their laughter fading into silence. Something about the ship felt wrong, not like prey, but like a trap. Inside their bridges, whispers began again. One pirate muttered that the message might not be a lie. Another swore he could feel something in the air, as if the void itself was watching. The commander barked at them to shut their mouths, his pride burning brighter than his fear. He declared that no human could stand against a fleet of pirates. He swore that in minutes the ship would be theirs, and yet, deep inside his chest, even he felt the weight of the warning. Even he could not stop the small tremor in his hands as the freighter grew closer on the screen. The message on the hull gleamed under starlight, bold and sharp. "Pirates beware. A human is on board." The words seemed almost alive, as if they were carved not in paint but in fire, a promise written for all to see. The pirates stared at it, their eyes dry, their throats tight. Some wanted to turn back. Others wanted to test the warning. Greed fought fear. Pride fought instinct. The fleet hung there in the silence, their engines humming, their weapons armed, their hearts racing. Then the freighter shifted again, not fast, not violent, but with purpose. Its systems hummed louder, and the air around it shimmered with invisible energy. Sensors spiked with strange readings, strange heat, strange power. The pirates scrambled to make sense of it, their screens flashing, their alarms buzzing. The young officer on the lead ship whispered again, "Commander, I think something is inside. Something waiting." The commander snarled back, silence, but his voice cracked, his tusks clenched tight. From the dark void, the freighter pulsed, its lights spreading across its hull in a pattern, like veins of light glowing beneath its skin. The pirates watched in frozen silence, for the ship no longer looked like a simple cargo hauler. It looked like something else, something designed to lure, to bait, to trap. The commander's pride wavered, but before he could speak, the freighter's comms crackled. Static burst across their radios, a sound like whispers, like the voice of the void itself. The crews pressed their ears close, straining to hear, but no clear words came, only the sense of presence, heavy and cold, as if someone unseen was already inside their ships, watching, breathing, waiting. Fear rippled through the fleet. Some gripped their weapons tighter. Others prayed under their breath. The youngest officer dared to whisper, "Commander, maybe we should retreat. Maybe this is not prey. Maybe this is death." But the commander roared back, "Enough, we are pirates. We do not run." He raised his fist and shouted to prepare for boarding, his voice trying to drown out the growing hum of the freighter's awakening systems. But even as he spoke, his eyes flickered toward the strange painted words again, and in his heart, he wondered if they had made a mistake. The void grew heavy, silence pressing on every ship. The freighter drifted in the black, alive and waiting, its warning burning bright on its hull. And though the pirates tried to laugh, though they tried to cheer, the sound died quickly in their throats, for they all felt the same chill, a chill not of cold, but of something far worse, a whisper that came not from space, not from machines, but from the unknown human waiting inside. And then, in a sudden surge of energy, the cargo ship powered up fully, its engines glowing, its systems alive, the void filled with the sound of machinery that should not exist on a simple freighter. The pirates froze, breathless, their screens filled with light, their hearts pounding, because they knew at last that something was waiting for them inside, something human, something far beyond prey, something they should never have touched. The pirates moved quickly, their boarding ships breaking away from the main fleet like arrows fired into the night. Engines burned with red fire as they closed the distance to the freighter. Inside the boarding craft, the raiders strapped on armor and sharpened blades. Rifles were loaded, grenades checked. The smell of oil and sweat filled the small cabin. One pirate shouted that the warning painted on the hull was a lie. Another laughed and swore they would carve the human apart and sell his bones for credits. But deep in their eyes there was a shadow of doubt, a tension they tried to bury beneath bravado as the freighter loomed closer, silent and waiting. When the boarding clamps hit the hull, the raiders cheered. Their leader raised his weapon high. He barked that no message could frighten true pirates, that this was nothing but prey. The airlock door hissed, the metal groaned. Smoke poured out as the seals broke, and then the pirates stormed inside, weapons raised, eager for blood and treasure. Yet the moment they stepped into the ship, silence wrapped around them. Not the silence of an empty vessel, but the silence of a place that was already watching, already listening. The pirates froze for a heartbeat, then pushed forward, boots clanging against the floor. The corridors stretched before them, long and narrow, shadows clinging to every corner. Lights flickered above as if the ship breathed in rhythm. The pirates marched carefully. One muttered that it felt like walking into a grave. Another said the ship smelled wrong, like smoke and metal, like fear itself. Their leader snapped at them to stay focused. Treasure was waiting. Slaves were waiting. Their laughter would soon return. Yet none of them could ignore how heavy the air felt, how every step echoed too loud, too sharp, as if the ship itself wanted them to hear their own fear. Deeper they moved, turning corners, passing sealed doors. Yet no sign of a crew, no sound of engines except the strange hum that seemed to come from the walls. One pirate whispered that maybe the warning was true, maybe a human really was here. The leader growled that if so, then the human would die, that no human could stand against trained raiders. His voice was strong, but his hands twitched on the grip of his weapon. Sweat traced lines down his scaled skin. The crew looked at him and saw his pride, but none dared say they saw his fear. Then, at the far end of the corridor, something appeared, a figure standing still, not moving, not hiding, just waiting. The pirates froze, hearts hammering, rifles lifted, blades raised. The figure was tall, broad, wrapped in simple armor, its face shadowed, its stance calm, too calm. And then the lights flickered brighter, revealing what they feared. It was a human, just one, standing alone against a crew of raiders. The pirates snarled to hide their unease. One spat on the floor and shouted that this was their prize. Another laughed nervously. The leader stepped forward and aimed his rifle, his tusks flashing. He demanded the human drop his weapon and surrender. Yet the human held no weapon. His hands were empty, his voice low and steady as he spoke the words that froze their blood. "This is your first and only chance to leave." The silence after those words stretched long. One pirate chuckled, but the sound cracked. Another muttered that the human must be mad. The leader roared with laughter. He declared the human weak, foolish to face them alone. He ordered his raiders forward. Boots thundered as they charged, blades flashing, rifles ready. Yet even as they ran, the human did not move. He only tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something they could not hear. His eyes cold, his stance unshaken. Then the ship itself came alive. The walls groaned. The floor trembled. Panels slid open. Hidden traps snapped awake. Razor wires lashed across the corridor. Automated turrets burst from the ceiling. The pirates screamed as the first row was cut down. Blood sprayed. Bodies fell. Chaos erupted. Those behind stumbled, tripping over the fallen. Grenades rolled from belts and exploded, filling the air with smoke and fire. The leader shouted orders, but his voice was drowned by the shrieks of his dying men. The human had not lifted a hand, yet death filled the hall. Those who survived the first strike staggered back, choking, coughing, eyes wide with terror. One shrieked that the ship itself was alive. Another cried that it was the human controlling it. The leader roared for them to stand and fight. But even as he shouted, the human stepped forward through the smoke, untouched, unburned. His eyes glowed in the flickering light. Cold and merciless, he spoke again, his voice calm, like stone, "Still here. Then you have not learned yet." The raiders trembled. Some dropped their weapons. Others clung to them with shaking hands. Greed battled terror. Pride battled survival. But the weight of his words crushed them. They felt like prey, like children in the presence of a predator. Their leader bared his teeth, refusing to bow. He raised his weapon and fired. Bolts of burning plasma shot toward the human. But before the blast could land, the walls shifted. Metal shutters snapped into place. Absorbing the fire, the shots vanished, leaving nothing but smoke. The human kept walking, step after step, closer and closer. Panic broke the raiders. One screamed to retreat. Another ran back toward the airlock. The leader bellowed for them to stop, but his voice was weak, drowned by fear. The human stopped only a few steps away, his face half lit by the broken lights. His shadow stretched long behind him. He did not need to raise a weapon. He did not need to strike. His presence was the strike. The raiders saw death in his eyes, the kind of death that did not rush, did not stumble, but came with certainty, slow and unstoppable. One by one, the pirates backed away, hearts racing, lungs burning. They looked at their leader for courage, but his eyes betrayed him, his pride shattered, his hands shook. He saw what they saw, that the warning painted on the hull was no bluff. It was truth. The human was no mere passenger, no frightened crewman. He was something else, something the old stories had whispered about, a force that could not be measured in numbers, a storm in human form. And as the smoke curled around him, as the ship groaned and hummed with strange life, the human raised one hand, not in anger, not in haste, but in calm command. The floor beneath the raiders shifted again, doors slammed behind them, sealing their path. Alarm screamed, and in that moment they realized the truth. They were not the hunters here. They were prey, trapped, marked, judged, and the judgment was only beginning. The smoke thickened in the corridor. Fire hissed from shattered panels. The pirates coughed and stumbled. Some dropped their weapons while others clung to them with shaking hands. The leader shouted for order, but his voice was drowned by the groaning metal around them. The freighter itself seemed to breathe. the walls pulsing with hidden power, the raiders felt small inside its belly, as if they had walked into the stomach of some waiting beast. The human stood calm in the haze, his figure tall and silent, his shadow long under the flickering lights. He moved with no rush, no panic, only certainty. His presence pressed against the pirates like a heavy storm. One whispered that he was no man at all. Another cried that they should flee, but their leader roared that they were warriors, they were pirates, they would not bow to one figure. His pride burned bright, but his words rang hollow, and even he could feel the chill in his veins. Then, with no warning, the floor beneath them shifted. Metal plates snapped open like jaws. One raider fell screaming into the dark, his voice cut short by grinding gears below. Another reached to pull him up, but razor blades shot from the walls, slicing through armor. Blood splashed across the steel. Panic spread like fire. They fired their rifles in every direction. Bolts of burning light smashed into the walls. But the ship swallowed every shot, shutters closing, plates sliding as if mocking their weapons. Their fury turned useless. The leader raised his blade, charging forward through the smoke, swearing he would gut the human himself. But the human did not flinch. He stepped aside with quiet grace. The floor opened beneath the charging pirate. Chains snapped upward, wrapping his arms, his legs, pulling him into the wall. He roared and thrashed, but the chains tightened until his armor cracked. His screams filled the corridor. His men froze, seeing their commander broken like prey. Fear poured into their hearts like black water. The human spoke again, his voice low, heavy, each word sinking into their bones. Still here, then you have not learned yet. The pirates trembled. The words carried no shout, no roar, but power deeper than sound. The survivors looked at one another, their eyes wide. One dropped his weapon and ran for the airlock, only to find the door sealed shut. He slammed his fists, begging, screaming, but the door did not open. The ship itself denied him, as if it served the human alone. Alarms rang overhead. Red lights flashed. The floor rumbled. Hidden doors slid open across the hall, and from them came machines, spider-like drones with blades for legs and glowing eyes. They scuttled across the ceiling, across the floor, their screeches sharp as knives. The raiders fired wildly, bolts scorching the metal, drones shattered, but more came, endless, relentless. One pirate was dragged screaming into the dark. Another was lifted into the air, his throat cut clean by steel limbs. The hall became a slaughter, blood dripping into the cracks of the floor. Yet through the chaos the human moved untouched. Every blast missed him, every blade turned aside. He walked through fire and death as if it were nothing, his eyes cold, his steps steady. He was not rushing to kill. He was teaching, punishing, proving a truth the raiders refused to accept. One human against many. Yet the many fell, and the one did not even break his calm. A pirate threw his blade at the human, a desperate last strike. But the blade froze midair, caught by a sudden magnetic force. It spun, turned, and flew back into its owner's chest. He gasped, blood filling his mouth, collapsing in shock. The raiders screamed, voices breaking. Their courage gone, their leader still chained and broken against the wall. Unable to help, unable to lead, he watched as his crew was torn apart, his pride melting into terror. One pirate dropped to his knees, begging for mercy, swearing he would leave, he would never return. His words shook with sobs. The human stopped in front of him, looked down with eyes that burned like frozen stars. The ship grew quiet for a moment. The drones paused, the alarms hushed, and the human spoke. You came to take lives, you came with greed. Now you will carry fear instead. He gestured, and the door behind the kneeling raider opened. A narrow escape. The pirate scrambled through, vanishing into the dark, his screams echoing even as he fled. The rest pressed themselves against the walls, trembling. One muttered prayers to long-dead gods. Another cursed his own fate. The human looked at them, his expression unreadable, and then with a wave of his hand the walls themselves moved, crushing one raider flat. The others shrieked and tried to run, but no path opened for them. The human walked slowly toward them, each step echoing like thunder. though the floor hardly shook. His presence alone was weight enough to crush their spirits. The young officer among them, the same who had whispered doubt before, now dropped his rifle, his voice shaking as he said, "You are not man, you are nightmare." The human's gaze turned on him, and for a moment the officer thought death would claim him. But the human only replied, calm and cold, "No, I am only human, and you were warned." Then the corridor exploded with movement. Panels ripped open. Waves of drones flooded. The raiders screamed as they were dragged down, their bodies torn apart, their cries echoing off the steel walls. Blood ran in streams. The leader roared in fury and pain, straining against the chains. But even he knew it was useless. He saw his crew destroyed by traps, by machines, by the will of one human, and his heart broke with the truth. The stories were real. Humans were monsters in the flesh of men. At last silence fell again. The drones vanished into the walls. The smoke cleared. The bodies lay scattered, torn and broken. Only a handful remained, shivering, weeping, their weapons gone, their courage gone. The chains loosened and dropped their leader to the floor. He fell to his knees, gasping, his eyes wide with fear and rage. He looked up at the human, and for the first time in his life he begged, "Why? Why let us suffer so?" The human stood tall above him, his armor glowing faintly with the pulse of the ship, his shadow vast across the walls, and his voice came, steady and final. "Because you came with pride, because you thought yourself strong, because you ignored the warning, this is the first lesson, and only the first." The survivors lowered their heads, broken. The leader trembled. The truth clear now, the human had not come to fight a battle. He had come to teach fear, and fear was the deadliest weapon of all. And as the silence wrapped around them once more, they realized the nightmare was far from over. The lesson had only begun. The pirate fleet drifted uneasy in the darkness of space, their engines burning low as whispers moved from ship to ship. The boarding party had gone in full of laughter and pride, yet the comms now carried nothing but screams cut short and static that chilled the hearts of even the boldest raiders. On the bridge of the second ship, a captain slammed his claws against the console, demanding answers. His crew stared at him with pale faces. Sensors showed the freighter alive and strong, while the signals of their brothers inside blinked out one by one like candles in a storm. No one dared to speak the truth, yet all felt it. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Another ship broadcast across the fleet, demanding to know why they were waiting. Their captain's tusks clicked in frustration. He growled that a single human could not hold against them, that the stories of human terror were myths told to frighten younglings. Yet as he spoke, his voice trembled and his eyes darted again and again to the image on the screen, the freighter drifting calmly, with the warning words still painted bright across its side. Words that now felt heavier than any cannon. "Pirates beware, a human is on board." On the lead ship, the commander strained against fear. He shouted into the comm that the boarding party would soon report victory, his words forced and hollow. His crew exchanged glances behind his back. They could still hear faint static filled with what sounded like metal grinding, screams echoing far away, and then silence, total silence. One officer whispered that they should leave, another hissed that running would shame them. The argument broke into snarls and shouts until the comm crackled again, and every voice fell silent. It was not the pirates speaking now. It was a human voice, calm and sharp, carried on every frequency across the fleet. "I told you to flee." The words echoed again and again through the halls of every vessel. The raiders froze where they stood. Some gripped their weapons tighter, though their hands shook. Others lowered their heads, afraid to meet the eyes of their captains. The silence after those words felt endless. A silence that pressed against the mind and made the heart race with dread. Then, without warning, one of the smaller pirate craft exploded in brilliant fire, the blast tearing through the void. The crew screamed as fragments of metal and bodies scattered across the dark. Alarms rang in the nearby ships as they pulled away, terrified the flames might spread, but nothing touched them. The destruction was clean, precise. No missile had been fired, no laser burned. It was as if the ship had chosen to die at the command of something unseen, something human. Panic rippled across the fleet. One captain shouted that they were under attack. Another swore their weapons had been hacked. Chaos spread like fire. Orders clashed with screams. Yet the freighter did not move. It simply drifted, lights glowing, engines quiet, watching, always watching. And then another ship lost power. Its lights went dark, engines cut, crew shouting in terror as they spun into emptiness. Again, no shot had been fired. Only silence, and then sudden ruin. The pirates looked upon the freighter and felt their courage cracking like glass under a hammer. On the bridge of the third vessel, a young pirate asked his captain if the old tales were true, if humans really could do such things. The captain snarled that tales were lies, yet his tusks rattled as he spoke. And deep inside he knew the truth. He remembered whispers from his childhood, stories of battlefields where humans stood drenched in fire, yet kept walking, of fleets that vanished after daring to challenge human wrath. He remembered, and fear gripped him, but pride forced him to raise his chin, though his throat felt dry. Across the fleet, arguments erupted. Some captains shouted that they should retreat while they still had ships left. Others spat that they could not run from a single being. Greed battled with survival. Pride battled with instinct. But before any choice could be made, the human voice returned, carried clear and calm through every calm. "This is your last chance. Turn back, or none of you will return." The words struck like blades. The crews shivered. The captains growled. Some cursed. Others prayed. The commander of the lead ship snarled that they would not yield, that pirates feared nothing, his pride louder than his trembling hands. He ordered the fleet to form attack lines. Weapons primed, shields raised, missiles armed. The raiders roared in forced courage. Yet the sound was weak, broken, hollow. Every voice carried fear beneath its noise. The freighter stirred, its lights shifting, glowing brighter across its hull. Patterns like veins pulsing. Sensors screamed with strange readings. Power far beyond what a cargo vessel should carry. The pirates stared wide-eyed. One captain whispered that it was no freighter at all, but a war machine hidden in disguise. Another cried that it was human magic, something beyond their reach. They argued again, their voices high and panicked. Yet the freighter said nothing, only waited as if daring them to test their strength. Among the pirates, tension spread like poison. Lower crew members begged their captains to retreat, hands clasped in fear, eyes wide, muttering that they could feel death circling them. The captains barked at them to hold their tongues, to stand like raiders, not cowards. But even as they shouted, they felt the weight of doubt crushing them. Even they could not escape the memory of the warning painted in bold on the freighter's hull. Even they could not escape the sound of the calm, human voice, echoing in their ears. A trembling officer whispered to his captain that maybe the human had already marked them, that maybe fleeing would not save them now. The captain shoved him aside, growling that such weakness would bring only quicker death. He ordered his ship to prime every cannon. Yet his hands shook, his heart pounded, sweat dripped down his scales. He looked at the freighter, and for the first time in his life he felt the cold truth. He was prey, and he could not change it. The human voice came one final time, softer now, almost gentle. "Leave while you can." The words rolled across the fleet like a shadow, heavy and quiet. The pirates trembled, some lowered their weapons. Others cursed and swore they would fight. The fleet hung on the edge of choice, fear pulling them back, pride dragging them forward. The silence between them stretched long and painful, every crew holding its breath, waiting for one to decide, waiting for the storm to break. And as the void surrounded them, as the freighter pulsed with hidden life, the pirates realized the truth they had tried to deny. Fear was already spreading through their fleet faster than fire, stronger than blades. And it was not the fear of ships or weapons. It was the fear of a single human who had spoken calm words and turned their courage into dust. And though they tried to stand tall, though they tried to roar, in their hearts they knew they were already broken. The void trembled with silence as the pirate fleet floated in broken formation, every ship bristling with weapons, every crew caught between fear and pride. The freighter at the center of it all glowed with quiet menace, its hull alive with strange light, veins of power pulsing as if the vessel itself carried a beating heart. The pirates stared at it through their screens, waiting for it to make the first move, but the freighter did not rush. It only watched, it only breathed. Then the silence shattered when a pirate ship at the edge of the fleet screamed over the comms, alarms blaring, the crew shouting that their systems were failing, engines sparking, weapons turning against themselves. Before anyone could respond, the ship erupted into fire, a bright sphere of burning metal spinning apart in seconds, fragments scattering across the stars. The fleet gasped, voices rising in panic, some swearing it was sabotage, others crying that it was the human. No shot had been fired from the freighter, yet another pirate crew had been erased. Another ship shook violently, its thrusters burning out, the crew screaming as their vessel spun uncontrollably. The captain shouted orders, but the controls ignored him. The ship tilted, engines roaring one last time before tearing themselves apart in a violent burst. The explosion painted the dark with fire, 2 pirate ships gone in moments. No enemy cannons, no missiles, only silence and unseen power. The remaining captains roared for order, their voices cracking, their eyes wild. Some demanded retreat, others howled for vengeance. Greed and terror clashed until the human voice returned across every channel, calm and merciless. I warned you, I do not need armies, I do not need fleets. I am enough. The pirates froze, their hearts hammering. The words pressed against their minds like cold steel. They felt the weight of truth behind them. They looked at the freighter again and realized they were not fighting a ship at all. They were fighting a human who had turned the vessel into a weapon beyond their imagination. They were facing the stories their ancestors had whispered, stories they had laughed at, stories that were now real. The commander of the lead ship snarled in fury, his pride burning brighter than his fear. He shouted that no single being could defeat a fleet of raiders. He ordered every ship to fire, cannons primed, missiles locked, plasma beams charged. The fleet roared with false courage as they unleashed their fury. The void lit with fire as dozens of weapons streaked toward the freighter. Bolts of light, streams of plasma, waves of guided missiles, all crashing together in a storm of death. The freighter moved at last, not to run, not to hide, but to reveal its true form. Panels along its hull shifted and unfolded, armor plating sliding into place, hidden weapons emerging like claws from the body of a beast. The lights along its spine flared bright white. A shield of pure energy burst outward. The pirate fleet's fire slammed against it and vanished. Missiles detonated harmlessly. Plasma beams scattered like rain against stone. The pirates screamed in disbelief, their strongest. Barrage erased in an instant. Then the freighter struck back, not with wildfire but with precision. Weapons glowed, beams of searing light cut through the void. One pirate ship split clean in half. Another burst into flames as its engines imploded. The human voice echoed again, cold and steady. I told you, you should have fled. The raiders broke into chaos, captains shouting over one another, crews panicking. Some ships tried to charge forward, others turned to flee. The formation shattered as fear took control. The freighter did not chase. It did not need to. Its weapons carved through ships one by one. Each strike clean, each strike final. Explosions bloomed across the dark, wreckage spinning into nothingness. Screams filled the comms before cutting short into static. The pirates realized they were being destroyed, with the ease of children crushed underfoot. One desperate captain tried to ram his ship directly into the freighter, roaring that he would end the human even in death. His engines flared hot. His crew screamed as they barreled forward, but the freighter shifted with a sudden pulse of energy. The pirate ship froze in place, engines howling yet unable to move. Invisible forces wrapped around it like chains. The human's voice came again, quiet and cruel. Your death will not buy you glory. And with that, the pirate ship twisted on itself, metal folding like paper, screams filling the void until nothing remained but fragments drifting into silence. The survivors wailed in terror. They begged their captains to retreat, to flee before they all perished. The captains bared their teeth, torn between pride and fear. Yet more ships exploded, more screams vanished into the dark. One by one, their courage cracked. One by one, they realized no amount of fire, no number of blades, no fury of pirates could stand against a single human with a will to fight. They saw the truth written in fire. The stories were no myth. Humans were monsters wrapped in flesh. The commander of the lead ship shook with rage and despair. His crew looked at him with eyes begging for retreat, but he could not give the order. His pride chained him. He had sworn never to run. Yet he saw his fleet burning, his brothers dying, his own hands trembling. He could not speak. He could not breathe. He could only watch as the freighter turned toward him, its lights glowing brighter, weapons ready, the human voice filling his ears. "Leave now, or none of you will live to tell the tale." Across the fleet, the last captains shouted orders. Engines roared as ships turned away. Retreat at last tearing through their pride, survival forcing their hands. Some fled with curses, some with tears, others with silence heavy in their throats. The freighter did not chase them. It only watched as they scattered like frightened beasts, its weapons quiet, its lights pulsing calm. The human had made his point. He had shown his power, and the pirates would carry that fear with them forever. The void grew quiet again, wreckage drifting, fire fading into ash. The freighter floated steady, its glow softening, its weapons folding back into its armor, like a predator returning to stillness after the hunt. Inside it, the human stood calm, unshaken, his breathing steady, his eyes cold. He knew the battle was not about victory alone. It was about the message, the lesson, the fear planted deep inside every pirate who had seen this night, a fear that would spread across the stars like fire. And as the last echoes of retreating engines vanished into the distance, the human whispered one last time across the comms, soft but sharp, "Remember this night. Remember this warning. One human is enough." The stars burned faint and far as the pirate fleet scattered into the distance, broken and fleeing, engines screaming as they ran from the freighter. The silence that followed was heavier than the roar of battle. Wreckage drifted slowly, pieces of broken ships glowing faint in the cold, and within that silence the freighter waited, still alive, still watching, its hull glowing faint as if it were listening to the fear left behind. Inside the command deck, the human stood unmoving, his eyes fixed on the fading traces of pirate engines, his breath calm, his hands resting against the console. He had shown them power. He had carved the warning into their memory. Yet he knew fear alone would not end the threat. Pirates were like hunger. They always returned, and the galaxy had never learned to fear the human truth for long. So he whispered to himself, "Not yet. Not enough." Across the dark, the surviving pirates argued over open channels, some demanding they regroup, others crying that they had already lost too much. Their voices shook, their curses empty, their pride shattered, but one voice rose louder. The voice of the fleet commander who still lived, his ship scarred but not broken, his fury greater than his fear. He spat that no human could be allowed to live, no warning could be allowed to spread. If one human could do this, then the galaxy must rise against. Then before they rose again, his words carried poison, and the pirates listened, their fear twisting into hate. The human heard the words. He let them echo in his mind, and he smiled a thin, cold smile. He knew hate was weaker than fear because hate could blind them, hate could make them reckless, and recklessness could be used. So he opened the comms again, his voice calm as ice. "You still stand, Commander. You still cling to your pride. So let us finish this, you and I. One final choice, surrender and live, or fight and fall. The fleet will follow whatever path you choose." The pirates gasped at the message, their voices rising again, some begging the commander to retreat, others urging him to attack. The commander roared that he would never bend, never bow, never let one human humiliate them all. His crew trembled but obeyed, their weapons charged, their engines primed. The pirate fleet turned once more, broken but desperate. They formed behind their commander, ready to follow him into one last strike. Not because they believed they could win, but because they could not bear to flee with shame. The freighter pulsed with light, its hull shifting again, plates sliding, energy rising like thunder hidden in metal. The stars seemed to dim around it as its power grew, and in that moment the pirates felt the weight of their choice. They had chosen pride over survival, rage over fear, death over life, and yet they charged forward, weapons firing, voices screaming in fury. The first barrage lit the void again, missiles and plasma streaking across the black. But the freighter answered with silence, its shield blooming bright. Every strike swallowed whole. No fire touched its hull. Then the freighter moved, faster than any cargo ship should, gliding like a predator. Its weapons flared and a pirate ship burst apart in one clean strike. Another followed. Then another. The fleet broke again. Screams filled the calms. But the commanders still shouted for them to hold. The human's voice returned, louder now, colder. You are throwing lives into the fire for your pride. You are leading them to death. And still you call yourself a commander. You speak of strength, yet you destroy your own. The commander snarled back, spitting hate into the calms. You are no god, human. You're only flesh. I will see you burn, even if it takes my last breath. The freighter did not answer with words. It answered with power. Beams of light cut through the dark. Shields tore apart. Pirate ships exploded one by one, until only the commander's vessel remained, his ship burning, his crew begging him to flee. But he roared that he would never surrender, his pride chaining him even as the fire consumed his vessel. The freighter closed in, weapons glowing, energy thrumming. The human whispered across the channel one last time. Then your choice is made. The commander's ship trembled, its hull cracking, its engines failing. Flames spread across its decks. His crew abandoned their stations, screaming as they ran. But the commander sat still, his eyes wide, his pride broken only at the final moment when he saw death closing in. He whispered a curse against the human, a curse that never finished, as the freighter's light struck and his ship exploded into a storm of fire and silence. The pirate fleet was gone, shattered and erased. Only wreckage left drifting in the void, pieces of greed and pride scattered across the stars. The survivors who had fled carried with them not victory, but terror, and that terror would spread like a plague, whispered in every den, every outpost, every dark corner where pirates gathered. The story of the night one human stood alone and broke a fleet. The freighter dimmed, its weapons folded away, its shields fading. Silence wrapped it once more. Inside, the human leaned against the console, his breath steady, his eyes cold. He knew the story would travel faster than light. Fear would reach places he could never go. And that was the true victory. Not the battle, not the fire, but the memory carved into the hearts of those who watched and lived. He looked once more at the stars, his voice soft, almost to himself. This was the choice, theirs and mine, and now the galaxy will remember. And with that the freighter turned slowly, its engines burning quiet, leaving the wreckage behind, leaving the silence behind, carrying the shadow of one human across the endless dark where new stories waited to be written and new warnings waited to be spoken. The freighter moved across the dark, engines burning soft against the endless night. The stars above watched in silence, as if they had seen another secret etched into the void, and behind it the wreckage of the pirate fleet drifted cold, broken hulls glowing faint as the echoes of the battle faded away. The human stood at the command deck, his hands calm upon the console, his eyes staring not at what had been destroyed, but at the path ahead. For he knew that this was not the end, only the beginning of something greater, something that would ripple across the galaxy. In the shadows of distant stations, whispers began, carried by the survivors who had fled with their lives. They spoke in voices hushed and shaken, telling of the freighter that became a predator, of the message painted across the hull, of the single human who spoke with the voice of thunder and turned a fleet into ash. At first the listeners laughed, thinking it was just a tale shaped by fear, but as more survivors arrived, their faces pale, their voices trembling, the laughter died, the whispers grew, and the story took root. In pirate dens where greed ruled stronger than law, men who had once laughed at danger now argued in silence. Some swore never to touch another freighter marked with human warning. Some demanded revenge, yet could not meet the eyes of their brothers. Fear began to crawl under their skin, because every shadow in the void could hide that same freighter. Every ship drifting alone could hold another human, and no treasure was worth that risk. The fear grew until greed itself bent beneath it. In markets and ports the story spread further. Merchants repeated the words to one another. "Pirates beware, a human is here. Save yourselves and flee." They said it as a curse, as a warning, as a prayer for safety. Even those who had never seen a human felt a shiver when they heard the phrase, for the image painted in their minds was enough. One human standing alone and a fleet breaking before him. It was too sharp, too strange, too true to ignore. And soon the legend escaped the shadows of pirates and reached the ears of captains, soldiers, rulers. Some rulers trembled, asking if humanity was rising again. If the old stories were waking, stories of wars where humans fought like storms, where empires bent or broke before them. They asked if one human could do this, then what could 1,000 do? What could 1,000,000 do? The silence that followed was heavier than any answer, for none dared to speak what they feared most, that the age of human power had not ended. It had only been sleeping, waiting for one voice to remind the galaxy. The human upon the freighter knew nothing of the panic spreading across systems. He sat in silence, his thoughts heavy yet sharp. He had not chosen this path to be a legend. He had chosen survival, but survival had become a spark now leaping from world to world, turning into a fire that no hand could hold. He wondered if the fire would protect or destroy. He wondered if fear would hold the pirates back or bring greater enemies upon him. Yet he did not stop, for stopping was not in his nature. He was human, and that meant moving forward. Across the stars, old enemies of humans stirred. Ancient races who had thought the species broken and scattered, they heard the tale and remembered scars burned long ago. Some swore to strike before the humans rose again. Others whispered to watch and wait, for fear is sharp, but patience is sharper. Yet even they could not escape the truth. If one human could stand against a fleet, then no corner of the galaxy was safe from the shadow of their return. And in the hidden corners of colonies where humans still lived, still worked, still struggled in silence, the whispers reached too, and for the first time in generations they heard a story that did not speak of loss or weakness, but of strength, their eyes lit with quiet fire. Children repeated the words like a chant. "Pirates beware, a human is here. Save yourselves and flee," and the sound of that chant filled their homes with pride, with hope, with a memory of what they had once been, with a promise of what they could become again. The freighter drifted near another system, its hull scarred but strong, its warning still painted bold across the side. "Pirates beware, a human is on board." The words glowing faint under the starlight, and when smugglers saw it, they turned away without firing. When pirates scanned it, they silenced their guns. When merchants passed, they whispered blessings, and the freighter moved untouched, its very name becoming a shield of fear stronger than any weapon. Yet inside the human did not rest. His eyes never closed to the stars, for he knew that legends were both a weapon and a chain. They could protect him, but they could also draw stronger hunters, rulers, empires, and he would have to face them all in time. He whispered softly to himself, "Fear is not forever, and when courage returns they will come again. But so will I, and I will not fall." His words carried no pride, only truth, and the void seemed to listen in silence. As he sat alone, the console flickered with a message, not from pirates, not from merchants, but from humans scattered across the galaxy. A single message repeated across hundreds of hidden signals. "We heard the story, we saw the fear, we are not alone," and his breath caught, for the legend had not only spread fear into his enemies, it had spread fire into his own people, and now he was no longer one voice. He was the beginning of many. The stars beyond glowed brighter, as if the galaxy itself had shifted, as if something long buried had awakened, and the freighter carried the human deeper into the night, leaving behind the wreckage, the whispers, the fear, but carrying forward the spark of something greater, a spark that would not die, a spark that would grow, and the galaxy would never be the same again.